First of all, you can tell me a little bit about how you first found the Hangar and how you first came to the Hangar and its productions.
That was in 1970. My wife and I had just gotten married and lived in Philadelphia. She lived in New York. We both had gone to theater when we were kids. And the Hangar and Ithaca College and Cornell got together to do a repertory series, 6 plays, 2 in each venue. And they did that for several years. When they did this a repertory thing. And my wife and I went to all of those. So then when the Hangar took over the whole bunch of them, we just kept going. We've had season tickets forever. Years ago, it may have been Bob Moss, I forget who was the managing director at the time. I'm not sure I don't even know whose idea it was. But I guess the theater needed a little bit of money. And they said, well, if you'll contribute $3,000, something like that, $2,000 or $3,000, you'll be a life member and you'll get tickets, free tickets forever. So I said, that sounds like a good deal. So we bought the life membership, and I don't buy my tickets every year. I give a substantial contribution, but I don't pay for the ticket.
Did you know Bob at all?
Oh, very, very well. At least for a year or two, and he was the artistic director. I was the chair of I was on the board for like a dozen years. And I was the finance committee or the treasurer or something like that the chair of the finance committee for several years when Bob was the artistic director. And things were nowhere near as good as they are now.
How so?
The theater was fairly broke.
Gotcha.
They weren't making, every year was running a deficit. And I guess they pretty much stayed afloat with contributions. But it was, it was touch and go. There wasn't a whole lot of money from the contributions and the tickets to put on anywhere near the quality of shows that the Hangar does now. They were good. They were fun. They don't mean at all to badmouth it, but it's not quite the quality that we do now. So it always was good. We always enjoyed going. And the acting was usually very good. So when Bob was artistic director, he obviously had connections in New York City, came up, and then Ithaca College and Cornell students in fine arts performed, and a lot of local people performed. And the talent was very good. There wasn't quite as much money for the set work. It was certainly, and the theater wasn't as nice as it is now, because it was renovated, a major renovation.
How do you see like the Hangar kind of relationship to the Ithaca community change and evolve?
Very good. That's very good. You take a look at in the program at the pages of contributors. You wouldn't have that if people didn't like the theater. That's one very good way to determine in particular, the relationship to the community. I mean, the theater can get money from other sources, from the state, from the Council on the Arts, national endowments, all that kind of stuff, and various grants externally. But a large number of local tells you that they value the theater.
And if you've seen every main stage production the Hangar has ever done, are there any like favorites that come to mind, or any that are particularly memorable for you?
Actually, the one I usually think about was quite a while ago, and it was sort of interesting because Rachel directed it, Rachel Lampert. She directed a performance of Sweeney Todd that I thought was absolutely fantastic, which was rather interesting, and that actually is a good example. I thought it was fabulous, absolutely fabulous. And just fairly recently, last year or so, I was talking to some gathering of people who are interested in theater, and somebody may have asked the same question. We were talking about it. So I like the story. It was the play, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the subject matter is the sort of off the beaten path.
Oh, it sure is.
But I just thought, it just kind of struck me. The musicals in general, like Hair, the Hangar did a fabulous production of Hair.
How has your relationship to the theater changed over time?
Well, I'm not on the board anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I still do go to all the shows. And I guess since I'm older and in somewhat better financial position, I give them more money. Otherwise, I'm retired and I have a particular medical condition. Big deal in terms of life expectancy or anything, but I kind of try not to strain myself a whole lot. So I don't do the physical stuff I used to do, but I certainly support the theater as best I can, like going to shows and contributing and that kind of stuff.
Like, what is one thing you can point to that the Hangar you think did really well? And one thing that you think, like, maybe in future the Hangar could try to do better and to grow with?
Well, one of the things I think that distinguishes the Hangar, I'm sure other theaters do some of this too, but one of the things that I think really distinguishes the Hangar is the work that they do with education, with students, younger kids, even fourth grade, elementary school, and the lab company, of course, and I think that's just fabulous. And Lisa Bushlow set that all up. And fortunately, it's been continued after she left. That's one of the things I think is obviously, in addition to the shows, one of the raison d'etre for the theater to be there. It does such a good job of dealing with kids and getting kids interested in the theater. You need to keep your audience. Well, you have to keep an audience. As years go by, your older audience gets older, and sooner or later, not around anymore. You gotta have younger people, both as performers and artists, and so having the education, the theater education program, I think, is really important. As one of the real big pluses.
Yeah, and what do you think the Hangar is doing? I mean, aside from its education programs, to really keep people engaged over time?
It's a little bit counterintuitive, I guess, but the various fundraisers, the spring galas and the programs, whatever, even though it's costing you money to go, but it's making you think about the theater and keeping you involved with the theater and knowing the other people who are around, who go to the theater. So kind of just having activities, or there are other ones too, I guess, the talkbacks and the before the show discussions now and again. And these keep people, this is something to be involved with. It's not just buying a ticket to a Broadway show and going home. You feel more, the people. I've known all the artistic directors. I've known, well, I was involved with the board, but even when I wasn't, I know the artistic directors and managing directors. I know Adam, of course. So you go, at least when I did. When I went to a Broadway show, you go to the show, you go home. You don't know anybody. I didn't. If you live in New York, maybe you get to. If you live in New York and you're a supporter, but you think more of the Broadway theaters as more as businesses. You don't think of the Hangar quite as a business. You think of it as a community resource.
So if the Hangar is kind of functioning as a community resource, what do you think the Hangar can do to better support and serve its community going forward?
Well, there has been, especially after Bob left, Bob Moss, because he was here for 17, 18 years. But there's been a succession of people since then in both of those positions, which of course is pluses and minuses. One of the minuses being everybody we've had has been pretty much excellent, and you sort of hate to see them go. But of course, the pluses are you get new people and new ideas and new ways of doing things. And yes, even the board now, when I was on the board, there wasn't a whole lot of change in the people who were on the board from year to year, dedicated people who stayed. And now I only know a very small number of people on the board. So there too, there's been turnover, which is good. Especially with that also, once you're on the board, even when you get off the board, you sort of have a somewhat different feeling about what the Hangar is and what your attitude toward it is. So it's good to get turnover and have different people involved.
Yeah, and fresh ideas and new input. And I mean, if a theater is just a group of people coming together to make something, new people means new ideas and new art, and that's really cool.
And it seems to be working. So far so good. I hope this year works out okay. And then we'll just have to see whether things can get somewhat back to normal next year.
How has this year been for you so far as the virtual content and move online and to Zoom and all that?
Well, it's not the same, of course. Even though, as it happens, I have an iMac and I have an Apple TV box, so I can AirPlay the productions to my 42-inch television rather than my 21-inch computer screen. But it's still not a live stage.
Sure.
So there are, limitations. Given the limitations, they're doing a very interesting job. Now, you expect a little bit of technical issues with the Zoom, but considering that this was not exactly a planned activity, I think they're doing quite well with it. Matter of fact, it would be very interesting. I haven't talked to any of the management staff yet, but I just sort of wonder whether there could be some arrangement, even when the pandemic stuff is finished and the theater is doing live stuff on stage again, whether there could be an option to do Zoom the live stage production for people who at a somewhat cheaper price. Now, what you would have to think about, of course, is are you cutting into your live stage audience, or are you getting more additional audience? Not quite sure how you figure that out, but it's at least it's worth a discussion.
Oh, absolutely. It'd be an experiment I'd be really interested to see the results of. I think as far as, bringing it back to accessibility, that's a really interesting way to try to make the theater more accessible. So you've seen both Skin of Our Teeth and you saw Uncommon Excerpts. What were some of your favorite moments from those pieces? Like, are there any moments of Zoom theater that really stood out?
I guess the first time they did one of those deals where somebody in one screen handed something to somebody in another screen, that was
the passing of the wheel.
It's new, and they have a whole lot of time. It'd be interesting to know how far you can take that. Well, look, I gotta go. This has been fun. Thank you for asking.
Thank you so much for taking the time. I really, really appreciate it.
And good luck with whatever you do for the rest of the summer.